Have you ever met someone who always seems calm, agreeable, and easy to get along with, but something about their silence feels heavy? Like behind their smile, there's a war being fought in complete stillness? That's not kindness masking confidence. That's a Type C personality, quietly breaking themselves down so others can remain comfortable. Welcome to BrainTrap TV. This is where we strip away the noise and examine what's really going on beneath the surface, inside our thoughts, our relationships, and the patterns we don't even know are there. And today, we're diving into the world of the Type C personality. The most misunderstood, the most overlooked, and often the most quietly hurting. They're the people who never complain, who always say yes, who stay quiet in arguments, even when they're hurting the most, who are always the mediator, the peacekeeper, the one who listens but never interrupts. On the surface, they seem emotionally mature, selfless, in control. But underneath, there's suppression, there's emotional repression, there's fear. Type C individuals are not loud. They're not angry. They don't explode. They implode. Every disappointment, every ignored need, every conflict they avoid, it doesn't disappear. It sinks, and it builds, until one day, it's no longer manageable. They're highly conscientious, detail-oriented, reliable. They will stay late. They will overwork. They will please everyone around them. But they often lose themselves in the process. They've learned that being needed is safer than being honest, that harmony is better than authenticity, that suppressing your emotions is less painful than expressing them and being rejected. But this isn't a personality built from preference. It's built from pain. Most Type C traits develop as a response to early environments where emotions weren't safe to express. Maybe they were punished for anger. Maybe they were ignored when they cried. Maybe the only way to be loved was to be helpful, calm, easy. So they adapted. They became what the people around them needed, never what they needed. And as adults, they continue the pattern. They become the ones who apologize even when they're right, who avoid confrontation not because they don't care, but because the very idea of conflict floods their nervous system with anxiety, who bottle up frustration until it turns into resentment, or worse, into sickness. Yes, sickness. Because the body keeps the score. Chronic stress, anxiety, depression, even autoimmune disorders. Studies have shown links between personality types like Type C and certain health issues. When you repress emotions long enough, your body starts speaking for you, and the world rewards them for it. Society loves people who don't make noise, who follow the rules, who don't challenge authority. Type C individuals are praised for being dependable, for not rocking the boat, for always putting others first. But inside, they're often emotionally exhausted, lonely, overwhelmed, afraid to say how they really feel because they're terrified they won't be loved if they stop performing. So how do you know if you're a Type C personality? Ask yourself this. How often do I hide my true feelings just to keep the peace? How often do I say yes when I want to say no? How often do I downplay my own pain because someone else's seems bigger? How often do I stay quiet just to be liked? If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. And you're not broken. You're responding to years of internalized messages that taught you it wasn't safe to be fully seen. But here's the truth. Suppressing yourself is not peace. It's a slow disappearance. It's a way of fading into a version of yourself that looks calm but feels dead inside. And the longer you stay silent, the further you drift from your own life. That's why this matters. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you deserve to feel, to express, to live fully. This isn't about changing who you are. It's about reclaiming who you were before the world convinced you that your softness was a liability. In the next part, we'll go deeper into the mental toll, the relationship patterns, and the invisible sacrifices made by Type C personalities. But for now, just breathe. You are not weak for feeling too much. You are not wrong for wanting harmony. But you are allowed to want peace without losing yourself in the process. There's something devastating about being the person who always keeps it together. Because eventually, you start to believe that falling apart isn't an option, that your emotions are a burden, that speaking your truth might make things worse. So you carry it. You carry everything. Quietly, internally, alone. That's the burden of the Type C personality. To be the peacekeeper in every room, even when there's a storm inside. To be the reliable one, even when you're running on empty. To be calm in the face of chaos, not because you're not affected by it, but because you've learned to swallow your reactions before they're ever seen. Type C personalities don't need chaos to fall apart. They fall apart in silence. In rooms filled with people who have no idea what they're feeling. They're so good at hiding discomfort that even their closest friends miss the signs. And so, they suffer quietly. They shrink without being noticed. They disappear emotionally, even as they show up physically. In relationships, they're the ones who give and give until they have nothing left. They love deeply, but they love passively. They fear expressing needs because they fear being a burden. So they settle. They compromise. They accommodate. And then, slowly, resentment begins to grow in the places where communication should have lived. They'll tolerate dismissiveness. They'll rationalize neglect. They'll make excuses for partners who don't show up for them emotionally, because somewhere deep down, they don't believe their emotions deserve to be held. But it's not just romantic love. This pattern bleeds into every area: family, friendships, work. At the office, Type C individuals become the go-to. The ones who never say no, who take on the extra tasks, who work late and never complain. And while this makes them appear incredibly competent, the emotional cost is massive. They feel invisible, unseen, used. And when they finally burn out, people are surprised. But they seemed so fine, they say. They never said anything. That's the whole point. They don't say anything. They internalize. They rationalize. They dismiss their own needs because they've built their self-worth around being easy, around being convenient, around not taking up too much space. But no one can sustain that forever. Eventually, something breaks. It might be a physical illness, a quiet depression, an anxiety that starts small and spirals. It might be a moment in traffic, a single sentence, a glance that finally cracks the shell, and all the unspoken hurt comes pouring out. Not in anger, but in grief. In the mourning of a self that was never fully allowed to live. Because that's what's really happening beneath the surface. Type C personalities are grieving. Grieving the years they spent being who they were supposed to be instead of who they really are. Grieving the words they didn't say, the feelings they never got to express, the boundaries they never dared to set. But here's the truth that begins to set them free. Peace at the cost of your own voice is not peace. It's silence. And silence is not the absence of noise. It's the absence of you. To heal, they must learn to challenge their own programming. To recognize that conflict isn't destruction, it's clarity. That asking for what you need isn't selfish, it's survival. That the people who truly love you will not leave because you stop pretending to be okay. And that's not an easy shift. It requires unlearning. It requires discomfort. It requires looking at the part of yourself that's been trained to put everyone else first and asking, but what about me? It requires sitting with the guilt that arises the first time you say no, the first time you let someone be disappointed, the first time you express anger. It means facing the fear that your relationships were only intact because you never challenged them. But that fear, it's the gatekeeper to freedom. Because when you start honoring your truth, not everyone will clap. But the ones who stay, the ones who grow with you, they are your people. And they were waiting for the real you all along. It starts with small steps. Naming your emotions. Saying, I feel overwhelmed. I need time. That hurt me. These aren't demands. They're truths. And speaking them doesn't make you difficult. It makes you whole. And slowly, the world begins to shift. You begin to shift. You stop bending so much. You stop apologizing for existing. You stop over-explaining. You stop rescuing people who refuse to carry their own weight. You begin to see that peace doesn't come from being passive. It comes from being present, from being honest, from being brave enough to say, this is who I am, and I matter too. That's what healing looks like for a Type C personality. Not becoming someone else, but finally becoming yourself. It always starts so quietly. A small decision to let something go. A skipped opportunity to speak your truth. A smile instead of a boundary. And then another, and another. Until one day, you wake up and realize you've been living a version of your life where your needs are background noise. That's the legacy of the Type C personality. Not destruction, not explosion, but quiet erasure. You didn't mean to lose yourself. You thought you were doing the right thing, being accommodating, being agreeable, being strong. You thought keeping the peace was a sign of maturity, that holding it all and made you the hero, that sacrificing your needs for others was love. But it wasn't love if it came at the cost of your voice. It wasn't love if you were the only one bending. It wasn't peace if it left you exhausted, unheard, and invisible. And now you're here, awake, aware, maybe angry, maybe grieving, maybe terrified to speak. But something in you is stirring, a quiet rebellion, a spark of self that refuses to stay buried. That spark? It's everything. Healing for a Type C personality isn't loud. It doesn't look like a sudden transformation. It looks like stillness, like someone finally breathing after years of holding it in. It looks like one honest sentence, one brave boundary, one tear that says, "I'm done pretending." You begin to realize that being emotionally available to everyone else left you emotionally bankrupt. That compassion without self-respect is just a slow form of self-abandonment. And the most powerful thing you can do isn't say yes again. It's say no, with love, and mean it. You'll lose people when you do this. That's the part no one talks about. Not everyone benefits from your healing. Some only love the version of you who never spoke up, who made it easy, who played small. When you rise, they'll call it selfish. When you protect your space, they'll call it cold. When you speak your truth, they'll say you've changed. And you have. You've stopped handing out emotional discounts to people who only pay in guilt. You've stopped trying to earn love through silence. You've stopped shrinking. Because your softness is not the absence of strength. It's the presence of grace. You are not broken because you want peace. You are not weak because you care. But your empathy should never be a weapon turned against you. You can be kind and assertive. You can love and have limits. You can care deeply and still walk away from those who drain you. This is the evolution of the Type C personality. Not becoming louder, not becoming harder, but becoming honest, transparent, whole. You learn that your emotions are not enemies. They are signals. Your anger is a boundary. Your sadness is a need unmet. Your anxiety is a warning. And your silence? It was never peace. It was survival. You don't owe anyone the version of you that doesn't exist anymore. You owe yourself the real you, the one who is learning to live with eyes wide open and a voice no longer locked in your chest. So to every person who sees themselves in this is your invitation. To stop performing, to stop apologizing, to stop waiting for someone else to notice you're struggling. You notice, you care, you speak, and that is the beginning of everything. This is BrainTrap TV, where we tell the stories no one else will, where we give voice to the ones who've been silent too long. Until next time, speak up, stand firm, and never let the world mistake your silence for consent.